Is it not on? Am I on, Nicholas? No? Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry about that. Had to toggle the switches here a little bit more. Welcome to the House Higher Education Budget Committee meeting. Today, the order of business will be receiving a presentation by the Kansas Development Finance Authority as it pertains to the university debt, and then we'll resume budget recommendations that were unfinished from yesterday. We will go back into the Kansas Board of Regents budget as well to make any additional recommendations on that, and then we'll go down the list. With that being said, I'd like to welcome to the podium our committee guest is Jim McMurray, Executive Director of the Kansas Development Finance Authority. Jim, welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jim McMurray. I'm the Executive Director of Kansas Development Finance Authority. Appreciate the opportunity to share some remarks regarding the state university's debt portfolio. Very briefly, the Kansas Development Finance Authority was established by the legislature in the late 1980s to improve state agencies, state universities, and other public and private entities' access to the capital markets. If you have any background in finance, you realize when the scale of financings you're doing, as the numbers get bigger, applying a degree of competence and expertise certainly helps in the execution and efficiency of those transactions. And we encourage the legislature and the state universities to continue to use their expertise. We're more than willing to provide advice and in appropriate situations actually step out of the way if needed. But we suggest that the expertise be used to avoid some of the pitfalls that someone that's trying to do a large financing transaction may make just because they don't know any better, and there's very high incentives for the parties on the other side to take advantage of someone that has perhaps some weaknesses in their knowledge base. So moving to the next slide, a little bit of market context. This presentation will be very similar to what I did last year. This probably will not be a whole lot of surprise because you're dealing with this, especially as you go through the appropriation process. And realize there was a lot of federal stimulus pushed out to the states and agencies in response to the pandemic. And one of the side effects of all this federal stimulus is to contribute to inflationary pressures. You're seeing that both in the financing markets and perhaps also in construction budgets. To combat this inflation, the Federal Reserve increased the federal fund rates by 4.25% in 2022, and then another 0.75% in 2023. Currently, the market's consensus is that further rate increases will not be necessary, but there's considerable debate on when the rate cuts will start. Right now, the handicap number is around 3 1/4 cuts in 2024. So likely that short-term rates will stay relatively high, especially what we got used to after the Great Recession, where rates were being held very low. And the table to the lower left just shows some two sets of rates. First, U.S. Treasury rates, which is obviously a taxable and very highly secured rate for investors. And then MMD stands for Municipal Market Index. That is a tax-exempt rate. Again, for a AAA credit, which is highly rated. So you can see a little bit of sense of the relative value of using tax exemption when a obligor has that opportunity, as most of our state universities in the state do for most qualified projects. And then just a one-day change, the change over the last 2 weeks, and the change is year to date. Things are always going to be a little choppy. They're not anything like changes we saw in 2022, but even going from October to October 2022 to 2023, there's a full range of around 1 percentage point variation without a whole lot of policy change on the Fed side. So, probably one of those things when you do capital finance, you're going to need to budget a little bit conservatively on the rates, and realize if you don't have flexibility on your timeline for a project, you're just going to have to live with whatever rates happen to be that day. The current state of the bond market, of course, is dramatically reduced, in many cases eliminated. The economic benefit of refunding debt has an optional call feature. We constantly monitor for those opportunities across all the state universities and the whole state's bond portfolio that KDFA is in charge of. It has not been a great environment for that in terms of doing economic refundings. At some point, it will come back and we'll do those transactions. Those transactions, if they're for economic savings, don't require legislative authorization. That's hopefully what you view as our job, to take advantage of those opportunities when they exist. The Kansas Board of Regents does have a policy on that, so the universities generally have to either have their transaction fall within the existing policy guidelines or actually seek approval from the Kansas Board of Regents. Moving on to the next slide. I have some summary numbers for each of the 6 state universities pulled from their annual financial reports for the 4 years from 2020 to 2023, as well as a projected 2024 balance. And for 5 of the 6 state universities, you can see they have deleveraged considerably over the last 4 years. And then Wichita State University being a different story, they have kind of bucked a national trend in terms of enrollment and research growth, having significant growth in both aspects. So part of being able to enable the operations to increase to accommodate those, they've actually had to leverage up quite a bit over the last couple of years. And then below the table, I can show you some annual change between the years and then the cumulative change for those years. So I think last year the chair had me repeat the statement, and it bears repeating now. The state and the state universities were very rewinding the clock almost 2 decades ago. The universities and the state as a whole were very lightly leveraged. So both on the state university side and the state of Kansas side, we leveraged up quite a bit from a position of low leverage to moderate leverage from 2005 to 2016, and that growth rate was unsustainable. The good news is since 2016, that has tapered off and in fact declined, as you note in the table above, in many cases. More details can be found in any of the university's financial statements, which are aggregated in the state's financial statements. And then I also have provided a Kansas debt study that has a lot more tabular data than my presentation does, if you want it for reference. And you're also free to contact me at any time, and we'll be as responsive as we can. And then on the final slide, I just give some context of how the university's creditworthiness is evaluated into the market. We use typically only Moody's Investor Services at this time. We've kind of gotten away from S&P. There is a little bit of selectivity on our end in that Moody's has a more favorable rating criteria for our state universities than S&P, and also the market has only really dictated the necessity for 1 rating, so we don't pay for 2 ratings. In the central column, you can just see the spectrum all the way from AAA at the top, way down, all the way down to single C, So the spectrum's quite broad there, and if you pull the corresponding university ratings on the table to the right of that, you can see all of them are firmly anchored in the middle to higher investment grade. And then jumping back to the first column, Moody's has a set methodology that use. Around 70% of their scorecard is based strictly on quantitative measures. You're literally looking at an institution's relative size, their operating margin, what kind of leverage they have in context of their total assets and their debt service coverage ratios. And then around 30% is on a qualitative basis, where the university may not have many controls over. For example, one of the big drivers in the state of Kansas is our demographics, where we typically trail the nation. Well, state universities don't have a lot of direct control over the state's demographics. So a hodgepodge of factors that all get blended into a rating conclusion. And each of those current ratings on the right side of that table are the same ratings that we reported last year. So that's the extent of my prepared remarks, Mr. Chair. I'm more than happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Director McMurray. I believe Vice Chair Sanders has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we please go back to the previous slide? So what I was wondering was, and I'll wait for it to come up here. Yeah, thank you. Why is it that Kansas State Athletics has a Moody's rating, but Kansas does not, Kansas Athletics?
So note 2, Kansas Athletics debt is privately held and is not rated. So they refunded their last series of KDFA bonds in 2020, and they did that individually with a brokered by a bank, and I believe they placed it with one or two insurance companies, and we were not involved with that transaction. It's not a publicly traded debt, so there is no rating.
So does Kansas University, the school itself, benefit in any way from how well KU Athletics is doing or not doing?
I would defer any kind of financial transactions between the two parties to the university. Generally, and I think this is true across all of higher education, they use athletics as a magnet for the institution. For example, the prior Pittsburgh State University President Scott said, well, basically athletics is our front porch.
Right, but I mean, all the other schools have a rating for their athletics. I would assume, even though it's not up there for state.
No, KDFA has not done any athletic specific university transactions other than for University of Kansas and Kansas State. We have not done a specific athletics secured credit for any of the 4 other universities.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Good question. Certainly. I want to ask you a question about the debt study, and specifically, I'm on page 5 of that, and I've asked that document be forwarded. I can't remember if it was forwarded or not to everybody, but it is on KDFA's website. But on page 5 of that document, if I'm not mistaken, it shows the revenue bonds outstanding. Then there's a data table. Could you distinguish and help the committee and myself understand what the difference between the user fee and the self-supporting columns represent and what that means?
Yeah, the user fee bucket is almost entirely state university debt, where the university is generating revenue, whether it's their tuition or housing or whatever. It's not directly tax supported, but it is a state agency that is, paying that debt. The self-supporting debt almost entirely relates to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment state revolving loan funds, which is loans to municipalities for drinking water and wastewater projects. And the repayment on those bonds are specific to the loans of those municipalities. So there's absolutely no state agency involved in securing the repayment of those bonds. And some description of that can be found under early in the report. I think it's page 3, which is captioned terminology and nomenclature. I have a brief paragraph on each of those categories.
Thank you for that. And also, when we got our budget analysis from KLRD, which gives us more information about the expenditures and financing for, I believe there's 9 buckets of money that goes to the universities. And one of those is the debt service principal. And then there's the debt service interest. And so as I understand it, the debt service principal is with the Kansas Board of Regents, and then the debt service interest is with the university. Is there, has that always been the case in terms, I'm not sure if you can speak to that or not, but.
Yeah, I would defer to the budget people and the accounting people for that. I don't know if we have a former state assistant budget director here, but is in a different position right now with the Board of Regents, but I'd have to defer to them.
Okay, thank you for that. But I just wanted to make note to the committee that there is a difference of where those line items are in our budget consideration. Could you speak a little bit to the, I don't remember what year it was before I got here, but when the University of Kansas bonded some dollars through outside of the state of Kansas, and kind of an update on where they're at on that.
So in the mid 2010s, the University of Kansas undertook a large capital project they call the Central District. And to do the debt financing, they ended up using the Wisconsin Public Finance Authority to complete that transaction. The facilities are constructed, they've been operating. I think the housing component of that is absolutely full at this point. The university is actually, I believe, short of housing units at this point. So it's something that's been built, been used, and they're servicing the debt. They did use an out-of-state entity to issue the debt.
So when I was looking at how much they're paying on the debt service on the interest, it didn't seem to be terribly high. Is there, I mean, it was a large amount, but the interest doesn't seem substantial. Is there a reason why and how that was negotiated at the time?
Specifically for the 2016 transaction with the Wisconsin Public.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would have to do entirely with the market conditions at the time. We went through a period where in the mid 2010s through most of the 2010s, borrowing costs were quite modest. That's been distorted a little bit. They went even lower as a result of the pandemic, and now we're probably back to where we were historically in the period before the Great Recession right now.
So if someone asked me, or just someone off the street asked me, so how much public debt is held by the universities? What is the number we should be using according to your data?
Around 1.2 billion.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I'm using the right and correct terminology and whatnot. And that would encompass the user as well as the other category.
Yep.
Okay.
I think there is some variations in terms of what's reported, that component units of the university system, which appears as a single number in the state's annual financial report. I don't have a detailed listing of what is in there and not in there. So there's a slight difference if you take the tally in the debt study and what I have that in that one table.
Thank you. You also mentioned in the user fee category that that would include tuition fees that are built into tuition costs.
Right. So the universities have largely done their financing transactions with what's called a general pledge of university revenue. And that is revenue of the university that is unrestricted. And what would be a restricted revenue is anything, for example, if you as appropriators had restricted not to be unrestricted, or some other pledge they had made to or a donor restriction or something like that. So substantially, the university's unrestricted revenue are, tuition revenue, state general fund appropriations, and then auxiliary revenues that are the main components there.
Thank you. And my last question, and of course, I'll ask committee members if they have questions as well. Do you have any data, as an agency or from the Kansas Board of Regents that would give you a number of how much money, because of the debt included, like the user fee debt, is built into the cost of tuition as a percentage?
I would have to defer to the university CFOs and KBOR. As you may know, budget buckets exist everywhere, and how it actually gets allocated can vary tremendously among the state universities. One way to ameliorate that is just do an arbitrary top-down approach of saying, I've got this many students and this much debt service, and you're just parsing it out. But on the back end, there's so many different budget buckets. They may say, well, whatever. So again, I would have to defer to them for any preparation there.
Okay. Is that something that you would have the capacity to, if we were to ask as a committee, that you would be able to work with them to kind of at least get us a better understanding of, how much we talk a lot about affordability for our students coming to our universities, and how much are we limited perhaps in terms of the tuition cost because of the debt?
I think we'd be more than happy to help, but what you're asking for is really resides with the university CFOs and their budget planning process, and with the oversight of the KBOR.
Okay, thank you very much, Director McMurray. Other questions from the committee? Representative Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for being here again. A couple things, I guess. One, is there any way a higher learning institution, or even a public entity can gain AAA, and what would that take?
It would take a lot at this point. And in the Moody's methodology, and then both NSPs, quite honestly, they look at the sovereign, which is the state of Kansas, substantially. So I think even if, for example, University of Kansas would do the closest to that, they're a AA2, they would have to get 2 notches up. Even if they start shooting the lights out, just say someone's going to deposit $3 billion in their endowment, and their student demand goes way up. A lot of international high margin students come in, research portfolio just blows up. You still have the state of Kansas there limiting it because a good portion of the budget comes from that state appropriation. And this would be analogous to KDOT lost their AAA ratings because the state came in and started year after year after year pulling hundreds of millions of dollars out there. So I think university, in our case, is going to be limited by this sovereign rating.
Good. Chairman, so as the state gets stronger, that would help, and I understand that.
Yes.
So what about, but and as we spend a lot of time, talking about debt, and I'm not sure, exactly where we're going with all this, but are you concerned? Should we be alarmed? Should we be alarmed in higher education with the amount of debt there is, or is this manageable?
This is absolutely manageable, especially with recent trends. I mean, I think if you look at the individual's metrics in the scorecards, for example, I mean, apologies to Emporia State, I'll pick on you, but, their scorecard impacts are mostly due to the operating margins they have and their challenges they have with, sustaining enrollment. The metrics for the debt size they have is, it's not nothing, but it's not the major factor. So if they can't sustain their entity on the top line and the margins, I mean, any amount of debt's going to become a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? If not, I'd like to thank you, Director McMurray, for being here again this year. I think it's an important conversation and our awareness to know exactly what the university debt portfolio looks like and understand a little bit what that's all about. So thank you.
Thank you for having me anytime.
Okay, next we're going to go back to budget recommendations. We're going to go back to Kansas Board of Regents. There's several things that we need to consider. So for example, yesterday we had motion number 2 and that motion failed. And some of that encompassed the pass-through. I guess they would be considered pass-through or enhancements. So on the budget, analysis, if you go to page 9, this is the final draft copy. It's on page 9. But if you only have a draft copy, it would be page 10, I believe. So this is the chart I'm looking at from the final BA draft. It has all the enhancement requests. So because that motion failed, all of those items are still, with the exception of those which we changed yesterday. That would be the facility demolition that was struck yesterday. The capital renewal was put off to omnibus. But I believe everything else in there still stands. So just want to go through that to see if there was any additions or subtractions or amendments that we need to offer on any of those items. So I'll kind of leave it open to the committee if you brought amendments or things. It could be things that were not included in the governor's budget recommendation, but maybe it's something you would like to add. So I also want to note that community colleges, the tech colleges, and Washburn University, they're not going to have their separate subcommittee report. That's all going to still be under Kansas Board of Regents. It's only the universities, the 6 regent universities in which we are separating out for those individual subcommittee reports. So if you have something regarding the community colleges, tech colleges, or Washburn even, that could be considered under this time right now. So
Chairman.
Representative Rogers.
I have a amendment, Jill. This will be for the tribes.
Or even have the revisor if you need.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe I can. This is hopefully fairly simple amendment. It is cleanup language that when we talk about those nations with historical connections to Kansas territories, the listing we had needed to be updated so we are correct with the fairly recognized tribes. And so that's what that is. That's all we're adding. It's just kind of a gut and go just on the tribe names. Stand for questions.
Thank you, Representative. Are there committee questions? Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many total tribes are there? I mean, I can count them too. If
I'm not sure. It looked like a good list to me.
yeah, I was thinking 23, but
There's 20 some. I'm not exactly sure.
okay. All right. No, thank you.
Like that. Yes. Thank you.
Representative, I did have a question. Are there any are there any tribes that are not now recognized under the new language, or is this an expansion of some names that may have not have been included?
The way I understand it is this is to include some that maybe were not, or if some of those changed and then became now recognized tribes, and then do have a presence, a connection here in Kansas, is why that needed to be changed.
And Representative, does this impact scholarship recipients? Is that why the update is needed, or is it more to do with?
I think it's more just a matter of cleaning up to make sure that as we go through this process, that somebody would not inadvertently be left out. That if there's a tribe and maybe a few members that for whatever reason hadn't, and so this is just to make sure that things are everything's covered.
Thank you, Representative. I'll ask the revisor if she had any additional information. If you would, just for the committee's benefit.
Yes, sir. What this proviso does, it's tied into F above that you'll see there on page 190, and this is for in-state tuition, or what we would generally refer to as in-state tuition.
Representative Sawyer.
I just want to make sure. Also on your amendment, it shows on line 23 on page 191, the comprehensive grant program. It lists 35,258,338. Well, yesterday with the Sanders amendment, we changed that to 45 million. So I just want to make sure we're not changing that back.
It's my understanding that that's not affected. That
just want to make sure.
In this amendment, Mr. Chairman, if I may, all this amendment is just updating the tribe names. The rest of it is, we're not doing anything else in the bill except that.
Representative, could you share with the committee where you got the list, the updated list? I don't know how that process works. So.
Well, the way I got it was from the Board of Regents. They said we need to update, and so it didn't get in earlier, and so this was probably the proper time to do that, to make sure that, again, not to inadvertently leave anyone out.
Okay, very good. I don't know if there's a motion. I have a little amnesia. the last few minutes, but would you like to offer your motion? Or was there a second? Okay, it's been Representative Woodard has seconded the motion. Is there further discussion? If not, we'll proceed to vote on the motion offered by Representative Rajas. All in favor say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Other items for the Kansas Board of Regents.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Rajas.
Thank you. I have another amendment.
Okay.
This will be for Washburn 1, I guess we'll call that this one.
Okay, would you like to explain it as it's being handed out?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an appropriation for Washburn for the Advanced Manufacturing Center at Washburn Institute of Technology for $3 million.
Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Amix. Discussion on the proposed amendment. Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this in the governor's budget?
Oh, this was not given the governor's budget.
Do we know why it's not in the governor's budget?
No, when we have tea every afternoon, she doesn't talk about it. I have no, if you come up with a good idea of what the governor did and didn't put in her budget, then you and I don't. I don't know.
I don't mean to be
No,
pejorative.
I know. No, I don't know.
Is there further discussion? Discussion or questions? Seeing none, Representative Rajas, and I keep forgetting to do this, you may close on your motion.
It's fine. I think it's a good investment for the state of Kansas, and Washburn is a good partner in higher education, so I close.
Thank you, Representative. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, is it 2024, 2023?
Representative Rajas.
Thank you. Technical colleges, Joe.
Representative,
Yes,
if you'd like to explain it.
Sure. I have an amendment
Yep.
for appropriation for technical college operating grants that we did last year for $10,500. And this would be distributed equally, so each would get $1.5 million. Mr. Chairman, I believe that with what we came with last year and challenged them to come back with results, they all came back with good results. I think this is a good investment for the state and would like to continue this as such. No, it was not in the governor's budget. I have no idea why, because this is something that is showing results so far with our institutions.
Thank you, Representative. I just want to understand, it's $10.5 million? Okay. Is there a second on the motion? It's been seconded by Representative Woodard. Is there a discussion on the proposed amendment or motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman.
If you need a break, I have one too, but
no,
you're on a roll.
You want to?
No, you go ahead,
A
Representative.
couple more, and then you can have at it. Mr. Chairman, I have one now. This will be for the community colleges. Is that what you're doing? Yes. Okay. This is dealing with the capital outlay aid that we did last year. Of course, it was not included in the governor's budget. This is the one that they're not eligible for career technical education capital outlay, and so the lists of schools if you're curious, which I'm sure you are, and I have that somewhere here.
Mr. Representative, before you continue, what's the heading on the amendment?
It should be,
State Board of Regents?
yes,
Okay.
State Board of Regents. Yes. And then the third line down says 5 million. So this would go, the 10 community colleges include Allen, Barton, Butler, Cloud, Colby, Fort Scott, Garden, Independence, Labette, and Neosho County.
Committee, is there a second? It's been seconded by Representative Amix. Is there discussion on the proposed motion? Representative, are you able to share with the committee why it's limited to those community colleges for the capital outlay?
Yes, the reason why is because these are the ones, others that when we did some consolidating, or I'm not sure exactly what the right word is. I don't want Heather to come attack me, but it was something along the line of some of the former vocational technical schools became in with the community colleges. They were able to keep that capital outlay money. These other ones did not have a technical college or a vocational technical at the time, and so that is why this is to try to keep them equal with the capital outlay dollars.
Thank you, Representative. Are there other questions or discussion on the motion? Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I just have a question in general, and this is probably for the reviser. So what exactly, again, is the relationship between the Kansas Board of Regents and the community colleges?
So I'm going to hope that I get this word right, that I believe they coordinate. They don't oversee them in any way. They both have boards that they talk to, or are affiliated. And then remember though, like Washburn Institute of Technology is affiliated with Washburn, Wichita State's Institute's Wichita State. And then last year with that bill with North Central and Northwest Kansas, that affiliated, with Fort Hays State University. That is the entity that controls, and then in those instances, those boards became advisory boards. So for the other ones, I think they do some coordination, but they don't control them.
Okay.
But the money money for them has always gone through K-Board. They've never been a state agency, sir, because the state doesn't control that in any way. And so I would say many decades ago, they decided that money that would go to them from the state would just funnel through K-Board.
Vice Chair Sanders.
I don't want to take up any more committee time, but I'm going to have to get myself further educated on this process. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Actually, I have one. If the revisor or Brianna, KLRD, could answer that question. Are there any, under this proposed motion, are there any limitations on what the money could be used for? I believe in testimony before the committee, I think it was said that the money could be used for tax relief at the local level, because they have a taxing authority as a community college, that some of that money could be passed through back to the taxpayers in some sort of a reduction on the mill levy.
So if I may respond, sir, the proviso does not limit it in any way and does not take that into account. Could it happen? I think it could, but the proviso language in no way would tie it to that or any other spending. Whatever they would be legally able to spend money for, then they could spend this money for that.
Thank you for that. I suppose that's maybe one concern I have as chair is just, if money is being distributed, that it could be potentially used for tax relief. Not that I'm against tax relief, but if we're going to do tax relief, I know there's 3 members of this committee that are serve on the tax committee, and I just don't know if that's the best way to provide tax relief, because you're really just taking SGF dollars and funneling it back to some community colleges that may voluntarily choose to go that route. Certainly, they're not compelled to, but just food for thought from Chairman Howe. So, is there any other discussion? If not, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, I do have a motion I'd like to offer. This would be the Board of Regents regarding the FTE positions. So as it's being handed out, I'll go over my motion. My motion is to delete $209,000 SGF and 2 FTE positions from the Kansas Board of Regents operating account for fiscal year 2025. I believe the agency had requested 4 FTEs to enhance support staff at the Board of Regents in some key areas. The governor's budget recommendation has approved 2 of those FTEs. And so this motion would be to delete those. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Representative Fairchild. Is there discussion? Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when I remember when we first went over this, the request was 4, the governor recommended 2, and now you're saying we should take it to 0.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What positions are these that are not being recommended, or where is that in the BA?
So if I look at my budget analysis on page 9, under request 1, it just says key areas including academic affairs, communication, adult education, and IT systems development. So it doesn't really have a title per se, but just some general language in what areas.
Thank you.
Is there further discussion?
Is it,
Representative Rogers?
Chairman, so is it just to not add FTEs, or what's your reasoning behind doing this? If they requested 4, and then if they think that needs 4, I mean, I'm just kind of curious of what. Is it just simply a matter of just your employees? Fine.
Well, that's certainly a topic of conversation in appropriations, as you well know. I really don't think it's going to have the support in appropriations, and if we can take care of that here, that would be fine. Have I had extensive conversations with the Board of Regents about the need for these 2 positions? No. Have I been approached about the need for these 2 positions? Not directly, no.
Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Representative Sawyer.
Do we know what these positions are for?
The only thing I have seen is in the BA that says there's key areas for academic affairs, communication, adult education, and IT systems development. So that's all the information that I can remember receiving. I do know there's been some discussion about some of the things that we enact as a legislature, like the Kansas Promise Scholarship Grant Program, where there's a requirement for recipients to stay in the state for a certain amount of time after getting into the workforce. And so that does require them additional staff time to track all those recipients and whatnot. So I do know there's those areas where we need to be mindful of as we enact policy, that it can create more work on an agency. And Kansas Board of Regents, I believe, do great work and have been providing me information when I request it and whatnot. And so it's not anything specific against the agency per se.
I'm a little bit concerned when they requested 4 and the governor only gave them 2 and now we're going to say 0. Exactly. A little more information.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a question, because other budget committee that I sit on, we're talking about FTEs all the time, and we've been recommending 0 throughout the process. Any additional ones? Is that just something we're supposed to do on all of these budgets? Anytime FTEs come forward, it's just not to recommend?
I haven't been directed to do that. No, I serve on appropriations, and just being on there for the last 2 years, I've noticed that does come up quite often. That there's, I think there's comments made this morning about the growth of agencies, and whether they're fee-funded agencies or state agencies, creating more FTEs, and sometimes they have multiple positions that are open. So there's not maybe a realignment of those priorities, but I don't see that work isn't getting done. I haven't heard that work isn't getting done. And we need these positions for those reasons.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we've had a lot of discussion about FTEs and appropes, but the motion was made to get rid of FTEs this morning. It was overwhelmingly defeated. So I'm going to make a substitute motion to still delete these, but to move them to review it omnibus. I don't want to get this completely lost in the shuffle, so I do think reviewing it later on will be a good opportunity to hear from the Board of Regents.
Is there a second on the substitute motion? It's been seconded by Representative Sawyer. So the substitute motion would basically to...
Same thing, it just moves it on the bus to be reviewed.
So it'd be the same language, but then adding on the end to be considered an omnibus? Okay. Is there discussion on the substitute motion? If not, we'll proceed to vote on the substitute motion. And this substitute motion would maintain the language, but then add on language towards the end of the motion, deferring it to omnibus for consideration. Vice Chair Sanders.
Mr. Chairman, are you comfortable with the substitute motion?
Thank you for asking, I guess. Obviously, I'd rather have my motion approved, but putting pride aside, I'm it's up to the will of the committee. I think everybody needs to vote their conscience on it. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. See, it's not just you, Ken.
Representative Smith.
I think the amendment seems fair. I think it seems fair. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? If not, we'll proceed to vote. Or actually, if you'd like to close on your substitute motion, Representative Woodard. Okay, all in favor of the substitute motion signify by saying aye. All opposed, say nay. It appears the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Substitute motion carries. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment if it could be passed out. You want me to go ahead or just wait?
Let's check and see if we have that. I believe I had seen it. You had shared, I think, with me earlier.
Well, I sent out an email earlier for the amendment for the, I mean, I'll just go ahead and read it.
Yeah, that's fine. And then if, did you work with the revisor's office? Okay. Then if the revisor had any additional information, maybe they could pull that up.
Delete 14,150,000 SGF from the need-based aid scholarship and recruitment amount. Yesterday, we added a 9 million increase for the Kansas Comprehensive Grant, which is basically the same thing. It's a program for need-based aid. And that program requires a one-to-one match for public and private. And the 14 million for the need-based aid scholarship no longer requires a one-to-one match. And so that's one reason why I'm introducing this. And then also with all of the enhancement requests that we already approved, we're starting to get way beyond the governor's recommendations. And so just trying to get it closer to the point where it balances or where it's similar to her recommendations to try to have, just trying to be fiscally responsible and not to be way above her recommendations. Also, I mean, obviously the appropriations committee can obviously always change anything that we do if they disagree with it, but that's basically my reasoning for the amendment.
Is there a second on Representative Fairchild's motion? Vice Chair Sanders seconds it. Is there discussion? I do have a question. So it says to delete 14.1 million. Is that correct, Representative Fairchild?
14,150,000.
Thank you. But this isn't necessarily a cut, is it?
Nothing we ever do here is a cut. It's just just preventing increases in spending.
Okay, thank you, Representative. And now, how much would be maintained in the need-based aid under the governor's budget? Even say your motion was approved, how many dollars would be still in the governor's rec?
I think that's a question for the revisers to answer.
I would ask if Brianna could call a friend so we could get that number, because I think it's important that we have exactly how much is in the need-based aid program. I believe last year's legislature, we approved an addition of 19 million. So I believe there's still a base amount of 19 million, if my memory serves me correctly. So we'll just pause, or if you have questions, discussion, Representative Woodard.
Mr. Chair, going back to the initial proposal in the governor's recommendations, the 14.1 million is an effort to bring Kansas to the regional median for need-based aid. I know that we did add some to the comp grant yesterday, but I fear that we love being last or next to last in this building, regionally and across the country. And I think that anything we can do to make college more affordable is really important. So probably no surprise, I'll have to oppose the motion, but would be willing to work with you on figuring out how we can still achieve the funding numbers based on what we did yesterday. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here because we don't have those numbers right before us, but unless I can call a friend in the room, perhaps, if there's a representative from K-Board that might have information. If you'd be willing to come up and share with us what the base amount is for the need-based aid. Elaine Frisbee.
Mr. Chairman, Elaine Frisbee, Vice President for Finance and Administration at the Board Office. Last year, the legislature appropriated $21.8 million in sum total to each of the state universities plus Washburn University, which passes through us.
Thank you for that, Elaine. I appreciate it. I was a little short. I remember we did add that money back in for Washburn because it wasn't initially included, I think. But thank you for that. So the amount remaining, if I'm understanding correctly, even absent the 14.1 million in addition, which is in the governor's budget rec, you would still have the 21.8 million dedicated for the 6 regent universities. And that's outside of the Kansas Comprehensive Grant Program, which is a totally different money. Representative Raj's question.
And Washburn. Washburn should be included.
Yes, they're included.
Well, you said the 6, so I just want to make
I mean,
sure.
yeah,
I know, but
the 6 regents and our municipal Washburn University. Yes.
since it's no problem. I just want to make sure.
So that $21.8 million is recurring in the budget. Unless we were to change that, but no one's proposing to change that.
Right.
Representative Rajas.
So again, so the proposed amendment is to take 14,150,000 out of that 21 million, correct? So then where's this coming out of?
Representative Rajas, the governor recommends, in addition to that $21.8 million for need-based aid, she's recommending an additional $14.1 million in new spending on top of that.
This is what the governor's rec was. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So I guess that's why I was trying to make the point that even though we delete it, it's not really a cut to anything. It's just we're not adding new spending for the need-based aid. Is there other discussion? If not, Representative Fairchild, you may close on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close on my motion.
Okay, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. All opposed, nay. Division has been called. All in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand. Yeah, I count 4, and all opposed, same sign. Okay, 4 in opposition. As chair, I'll vote in the affirmative to break the tie. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be recorded as voting no.
Okay, Representative Sawyer, Representative Woodard, like their votes recorded, and Representative Amix as voting in opposition. Okay, thank you for that. I do have a couple of amendments or motions I would like to make. First is regarding the Kansas Osteopathic Medical Service Scholarship. This motion is to add $2.2 million SGF to the Kansas Osteopathic Medical Service Scholarship for fiscal year 2025. Committee, as you'll know, we did have the Kansas Osteopathic Medical School testify in our committee. made us aware that there's been this scholarship program around that's been in statute since the 1970s, but it hasn't received state support since the early 2000s, I believe. And so the only way that they're funding this is through repayments. And those would be recipients of that scholarship that do not honor their obligations and have to pay a penalty and interest back to the scholarship program. So this proposed motion would allow up to, is it? It would allow 20 students, $20,000 per year per student, but I think it's capped at a certain amount of students. So that's what that's for. I can go back in the testimony to look, just if anybody has a question on that. Is there a second on the motion? It's been seconded by Representative Woodard. Discussion? Representative Woodard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate this, and I think generally we need, so I support the motion. I just want to make sure the committee knows we just voted to not add need-based aid for students. KU Medical Center doesn't receive a ton of funding from the Kansas Comprehensive Grant, so not funding that, again, we need more medical providers, but not funding that means not adding about $2 million in need-based aid for students at KU Medical Center while adding $2 million for osteopathic medicine. So I just want to make sure the committee is aware. It does feel a little bit like we're picking DOs over MDs, and I think generally we need more of both. But I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Woodard. Vice Chair Sanders.
Mr. Chairman, so this would take the budget for Kansas osteopathic and medical services from 0 to 2.1 million. Is that that's my understanding? Is that correct?
I'll have to double check on that exactly. So, excuse me. The scholarship's been authorized. It's been in statute for a long time, but we're just adding money to the scholarship so they're not reliant solely on the repayment source of revenue. It would create 10 new scholarships at the amount of $55,000 per year, enticing student doctors to commit to practicing primary care medicine in underserved areas of Kansas. Other questions or discussion? Representative Smith.
I guess it really doesn't matter, but is it all for incoming freshmen, or could it be for freshmen, sophomore, juniors, so forth?
You mean if someone transferred into the school? I do know the way the scholarship program has been set up. It was before the state had an osteopathic school of medicine. And so these students, we were paying, awarding scholarships for them to attend out-of-state institutions, then with the hopes of getting them back to Kansas. And so I don't know exactly the answer to that question, but I do believe they try to get them, those recipients, when they first come in the front door as a freshman, or not freshman, but as a first-year student. I'm sorry for saying that. Other questions from the committee or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor of the motion to add 2.2 million SGF to the osteopathic medical service scholarship for fiscal year 25, signify by saying aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. I guess I have another, I want to go to the University of Kansas Medical Center. And I have an an amendment or motion I'd like to offer. On this motion, I didn't list on the sheet that will be handed out, so I need you to fill in $750,000 in the blank spot. So this is, I move to add 750,000 SGF for fiscal year 25 to the University of Kansas Medical Center for the purpose of supporting the family residency programs, which include the Smoky Hill Family Residency, Ascension Via Christi Family Residency, and the Wesley Family Medicine Residency programs. It's been seconded by Vice Chair Sanders. Is there discussion or questions on the motion? Yes, Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I've missed a few committee days, but did they request this?
Representative, no, they did not request this. This is my request, but I have done some, I do represent, my district represents part of the Smoky Hill Family Residency. 94% of the residents that go through the residency program stay in the state and serve in rural areas or underserved areas of our state. And so I've made sure to include everything under the umbrella of the Kansas Medical Center to encompass not only the Smoky Hill residency program, but the other ones that are existing.
They didn't request it. That's all I needed. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Are there other questions? Representative Smith.
You know, there's three different residencies. Would they just split the money equally, or is there a need base, or how's that given out? So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't know the exact formula per se. In my conversations with the Smoky Hill Family Medicine Residency Program, which is a partnership with our local hospital, the Salina Regional Healthcare, and also Salina Family Healthcare, which is a federally qualified health center. That they partner on that residency program. This residency program has been around since the 1970s, as I understand it. I believe the funding has been relatively flat since fiscal year 2005. Since 2010, the residency program cost in Salina have increased 87%, but the state funding has decreased 4%. So I really bring this motion because I want us to be aware that we do have these residency programs that both MDs and DOs participate in. When they had, I think they had a day at the Capitol maybe 3 weeks ago, and I met some of those residents, and they're great folks. They all have plans to go back to rural areas to make sure that folks have access to medical care in their communities. So part of it isn't just a selfishness to represent my district, but part of it's something that is, it's not because of anybody's ill intention, but sometimes under the umbrella of, say, the University of Kansas Medical Center, they do so many things and they cover so many areas that we don't see some of these things rising to the top of our line items and whatnot. So that was part of the primary reason I wanted to bring that up, is that we have these residency programs, but they're not necessarily getting the attention they need. And I think everybody, at least that I've talked to in the Capitol, is concerned about making sure that people are served in their communities with qualified medical professionals. So. Is there any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Okay. Are there any other items for the Kansas Board of Regents? Representative Rajas.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I do apologize, committee, for coming at this late. I have a request from a colleague. It is not printed out, but requesting $270,000 added to Washburn's municipal operating grant for operational costs of the Dole Center, the new building there, the showpiece on the Washburn campus that is home to the law school. So, but again, asking that be included in Washburn's municipal operating grant. Stand for questions.
Hey, are there any, is there a second on the motion? It's been seconded by Representative Woodard. We can now have discussion. Discussion on the motion.
Yes, fiscal 25. Sorry.
Okay, just a clarification for fiscal year 2025. Okay. Vice Chair Sanders?
Could you repeat the number again?
$270,000.
Thank you, Mr. Representative.
Representative Amix?
Question to the representative.
Yes.
So why the lateness of this request?
Well, you know, we've been trying to find votes for that dadgum override, so I guess that's what we're taking. No, I don't. I think with everything else going on in the shuffle, is why it became why it came so late. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Plus looking for votes.
Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any reason why they can't pay for some of this through private donations?
I believe the motion is only for the municipal operating grant for Washburn University. So it would be adding
270,000.
If approved, the motion is just for $270,000. So in Washburn University's, they have one line item, I believe, in statute or the budget, and so I don't know how many years they've received 14 million. Oh, you asked. I'm sorry. I
mean,
wasn't answering your question.
My point is just more of a philosophical point that, I mean, for some of these things, if we don't want to increase state funding, these universities have a lot of big donors who are willing to donate to a lot of these different things, and we already added 3 million. We can't just say yes to all these things, or else we're just going to be way over. I mean, nothing I'm saying is going to be surprising to anybody, but that's just my point of view.
Is there other discussion on the proposed motion? If not, Representative Rajas, you may close.
I close.
Okay, it's been moved to add 270,000 SGF to fiscal year 2025 for Washburn University's municipal operating grant. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, nay. Division has been called for. All in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand. All opposed, same sign. Appears by a vote to 5-3, the motion carries. Okay. Are there other items by members of the committee? If not, I do have one myself. This year was a little bit different. This is for Kansas Wesleyan University. I'll go ahead and read my motion. The motion is to add $575,000 SGF to Kansas Wesleyan University for their Rodale Institute Farming Training, Education Facility, and their Urban Ag Lab for fiscal year 2025. It's been seconded by Representative Vice Chair Sanders. Now we can have a discussion. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since I've been in the legislature, I've voted in favor of school choice bills that provide funding to students, and then the student has the option of taking that money and attending a private school. However, this is different since it seems to me like we're directly giving money to a private college, and I'm just not in favor of directly funding private colleges. I do think that it's different from my perspective to give money to students to attend a private college. I'm not in favor of directly funding them, and I think that can cause some unintended consequences and basically just result in more red tape, more government regulations on these private colleges, and I don't think it's a good precedent to begin directly funding private colleges.
Thank you, Representative. Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a presentation on this very early on in the session, and I believe that this number is significantly less than what the ask was. Is that correct?
That is correct. I did look at they had a 2-year ask that they were looking at. They had requested $1 million for year 1 and $1 million for year 2. So this amendment is a scaled down version of that, and this is specific to support their Rodale Institute Farmer Training Educational Facility and their Urban Ag Lab. So it doesn't include anything for their student stipends or their faculty salary or benefits or anything like that. So it's, I guess you could say, more about infrastructure. They have leveraged a lot of private commitments and donations to help launch this initiative. And, it's not often that a private institution gets the opportunity just by the nature of the way we do things up here, because everything is focused on the public institutions and whatnot. And oftentimes think that is maybe lost in the conversation that we do have a lot of excellent private institutions in our state that contribute to the economic well-being of our state. And many of the students do stay in our state and continue to be good citizens of our country. And so, I bring this amendment to acknowledge that and with the hopes that we can be willing to also support those that are at our private institutions that do good work. I do know there are other arrangements through nursing initiatives and things that the state does support. Our students in their careers that attend private institutions as well. And so I don't have any other comments, but if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to stand for questions. Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to echo the comments from the rep from St. John. I think this sets an interesting precedent in funding directly to a private institution. I have no problem with our private institutions, but they can do it with private dollars. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there any other discussion? Representative Wassinger.
How did this even come up? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, is this your a university that you went to, or?
No, thank you for asking. I actually didn't attend a private university. I went to Kansas State University. Kansas Wesleyan University is in my home county. After redistricting, I think Representative Sanders has more of the college campus. I might have the stadium or something like that. So, but many of the people that live or work in my district, they work on campuses, faculty and many students that are in my district as well. I think we had maybe close to 25 students from Kansas Wesleyan University here yesterday for the governor's celebration of Black History Month. And so it's really neat to see students from all over. I met a student from Canada, and they chose Kansas Wesleyan University. It's kind of interesting how people can find their way to Kansas, but they do. And so that is the connection. Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And they did come and ask. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean they should get it, but they did come and ask.
Correct. They provided testimony. Dr. Matthew Thompson provided testimony on January 25th, early on in session about this project. Any other questions or discussion? If not, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. No, the noes have it. Motion does not pass. Let me just pause for a second here, and then we'll resume our recommendations. Just a minute. I guess it's considered a proviso. Yeah. This is a proviso for the Kansas Board of Regents. So I'll let it be distributed to the committee. So this summer, the United States Supreme Court ruled in Students for Fair Admissions versus President and Fellows of Harvard College. It was a court case that was also, I don't know if the correct term was enjoined or to the similar lawsuit against the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where the universities were, they were making decisions based off of race in terms of their admissions policies. And so there was a group that had sued students that had sued both Harvard and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So basically the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that you can't do that. It's not constitutional. It's a violation of the Equal Protection Clause, I believe. And so this proviso directs the Kansas Board of Regents to submit a report on their findings about whether this ethnic minority scholarship program is, if there needs to be changes, is it constitutionally sound? You know, do we need to make changes statutorily? Because we have an ethnic minority scholarship program that's out there. And I know I had asked last year, I was inquiring about scholarships for people that may be underserved or maybe don't have the access to the pipeline to get a scholarship. And I had asked the Board of Regents at the time, and if my memory serves me correctly, I was told, you know, don't add any money to this scholarship program because we have a pending court case with the U.S. Supreme Court. So since that time, the U.S. Supreme Court has made the ruling, but I don't know whether that scholarship program needs changes or not. And so this directs the Board of Regents to research that issue and report back to the legislature, you know, before January 24th of 2025. So if they have changes that we need to make, they have a deadline of when they need to let us know when we need to make changes. So that scholarship program can continue, or maybe they have findings that say, you know, this violates the Supreme Court ruling. So we may have to change it altogether. So. there a second? Okay, it's been seconded by Vice Chair Sanders. Is there any discussion? Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just this morning, the Supreme Court declined to hear a challenge to admission rules at a Virginia school, allowing a policy aimed at diversifying the student body. I don't see how this is any different. This is just a scholarship that supports diversifying student bodies. So I'm not an attorney, and I don't think any of us on here are. So I don't know why we want to play attorney, but again, probably no surprise to you, but I'll be voting no. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So the Kansas Ethnic Minority Scholarship was enacted in 1989 to increase enrollment in Kansas colleges and universities of academically able ethnic and minority Kansas residents. The program assists financially needy Native American, Asian, Pacific Islander, Black, and Hispanic scholars who desire to become full-time students at an accredited Kansas institutions. Students may attend Regents institutions, Washburn University, public community colleges, and accredited private colleges and universities for undergraduate studies. The program provides a maximum grant of, this number says $1,850 to graduating high school seniors who complete the Kansas Scholars Curriculum and who are competitive in test scores, GPA, and class rank. So this proviso doesn't say, it doesn't hold an opinion about the merit of the scholarship program. It's just directing the Kansas Board of Regents to get back to us to evaluate whether it is in good standing in light of the U.S. Supreme Court ruling. That's all I'm requesting. I'm not holding any judgment over the merits of the program. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the scholarship just stays as it is, and then they do a study and let us know next January. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, it doesn't even compel them to do a study per se or hire a consultant or do anything like that, but evaluate it and get back to us. Let us know. Is this okay to continue funding in light of the U.S. Supreme Court ruling?
Now, will we not fund it this year then, or?
No, the governor's budget recommendation has in her recommendation $296,498 in that scholarship program.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there any other discussion? If not, we'll proceed to vote on the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye. All opposed, say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Just need to pause for 1 second here. Vice Chair Sanders.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that the committee approve the governor's recommendation relative to the Kansas Board of Regents as recommended by the governor.
As amended?
Yes, yes, as amended.
Okay. Is there a second? Representative Rajas seconds the motion. Any discussion? Any discussion? Representative Smith.
Would you explain just a little bit, Representative? Say it again.
So we've made amendments, but as long as we include the amendments that we've already made, otherwise we approve the governor's recommendations as we have amended them.
So it's basically, this is just us wrapping up our deliberations on the Kansas Board of Regents.
Relative to the Board of Regents, yes.
Any other discussion? If not, we'll proceed to vote on approving the governor's budget recommendation for fiscal year 25 as amended. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, committee, it's been a pleasure working with you on these the last day or two. We don't have the next week's weekly agenda out yet, but I can give you a preview of what that looks like. Yeah, we're out of session Monday and Tuesday next week. We'll come back Wednesday. We'll have a presentation from the Legislative Post Audit about their audit on diversity, equity, and inclusion spending on university campuses, as well as foreign contributions at universities. They'll do a presentation. Then we'll jump right back into recommendations. We've got Fort Hays State University, Pittsburgh State University, University of Kansas, I believe we're doing Wednesday. Thursday would be K-State University, K-State University, Emporia State University, and Wichita State University on Thursday. What we're not able to finish on Thursday, we'll have to come back on Friday to wrap that up, because I have to report that out starting on Monday, March 4th and Tuesday, March 5th for those next items. For what we approved today, I'll report out next Wednesday to appropriations. So with that being said, I appreciate you staying with me for a little bit of extra time today, but the meeting is adjourned.